in a place called Tarnagulla, which is 40 kilometres west of Bendigo. In 1850, there was a gold rush here in Victoria. It started in Clunes in 1850, and then they found gold in Ballarat in 1851, and then around Bendigo, starting with what my grandfather found in Tarnagulla in 1852. And I'll just read you this. I looked this up. I like book reading, and I read. This is it. 15,000 immigrants arrived by sea in 1851, all for the gold in Victoria. 94,000 immigrants arrived by sea in 1852 for the gold. 250,000 immigrants arrived in 1853. They absolutely deserted Melbourne and they deserted Adelaide. They just left, they dropped it, they dropped what they were doing. Governor Phillip had a big problem because he couldn't have anyone to run the public service. It was unbelievable. 11,000 people poured into Victoria from South Australia, and my grandfather, Edward Bright, was one of them. He came across with his family. He had a farm. He'd come from England, 1849, and then he left his farm in about 1850, and he came across to Sandy Creek, Tarnagulla, where they found the first gold ever discovered in that Tarnagulla area. And it's caused a gold rush, caused a big gold rush.
Thank you.
Criminals came from Van Diemen's Land to take from Tasmania, and Melbourne was deserted, and society was not disorganised, it dissolved, completely dissolved. There were so many people. Before the end of December 1851, 10 tonnes of gold was taken from the land and picked up in the Victorian Goldfields with a spade. And they called the potato diggings. They put the spade down, there was so much gold, they picked up pieces as big as potatoes. Then they moved on to another spot over here, and they kept going, and they found more and more gold. In 8 years after 1852, they found 95,000 pounds, English pounds worth of gold. So, and there was 10 tonnes of gold, and in the first 2 years, 1850 and 1852, they found 12,500 pounds of gold in the first 12 months. Yeah.
What would that translate to today's dollar?
A lot of money.
Billions.
It was a lot of money.
Billions.
Anyway, my Kimpton family on the grandfather's side, I'm not going to talk about them. I'm going to talk about the grandmother's side. Goes back to the Bright family. And Edward Bright, he came with his dad and mum from England, landed in Adelaide in 1849, and then they got together, and the father, mother, and we think young John, who was a Christian poet, related to me, John, they came on the ship around to Melbourne, and then they went up to Sandy Creek, Tarnagulla, where they met Edward, who went overland all the way from the Columburra station, which is over near Robe in South Australia.
Oh.
He drove his bullocks and dragon all across. There was no bridges then. He went by the tracks and he got there. And he called the old pioneer, the old Bendigonian. But he is a very, very interesting person. And when they were at the farm, what happened was they moved over for 3 years. They found 3,000 pounds worth of gold. They went back to Adelaide, back to their farm in Columburra, and they had the money. They bought a couple of thousand sheep. And then this young man called Adam Lindsay Gordon, who's a national poet, he's got a bust in Westminster Abbey, and he's also got a statue in Parliament in the Spring Street, Melbourne, looking towards Columburra. He actually asked for a job breaking horses with Uncle's farm, and he did that for 3 years. And of course, he's about 22. He meets my auntie Elizabeth and falls in love with her, and there's a romance with Auntie Elizabeth. Now, I started to write all this up, and the reason I wrote it up was for my grandchildren. So I'll send this. This is the aisle moment. So this is Zara, one of my little granddaughters. So this is the aisle moment. So you can have a look at these. But this is the reason I'm interested in the stories, not so much the actual tree itself. But I want to leave a legacy, write some information that they can read about their grandfather, me, But this is the story. Now, I'll hand this round. This is a very rough family tree that I did, which shows me here, and Dad and Mum, and then it goes over to Vera, Gladys. They lived in Camberwell, by the way. Yeah. And anyway, and then William Williamson and Susanna Bright, and then Edward Bright. He's our hero. He's the one that came across from South Australia and found the gold in Tarnagulla. Now, John Bright, I was excited to find him. Oh, I found Elizabeth. She had the romance with the poet, the national poet, Adam Lindsay Gordon. It's always nice to find a famous person there, get linked with, but I couldn't believe it. I read through about 20 different articles in the Trove. Trove is a database of the National Library of Australia, and it's got all the papers of the day for 100 years. And so it's got the Bendigo Advertiser, it's got the Portland Guardian, and there was about 20 articles, 10 of which Elizabeth wrote a lot and Edward wrote a lot because they wanted to get the £500 reward for discovering gold at Tarnagulla. And they never got it because they didn't do it the right way. They waited until they went back to Adelaide before they claimed it, and they couldn't get it, but they kept writing letters to the editor. So all those letters are there. Now, I brought some books in. This is a book by Adam Lindsay Gordon. He's a national poet. He was, I don't know if you know the story, but he was a horse breaker. He was first a mounted policeman in 1849 at in and around Rome and around there. He did that for 2 years, and then I think he fell in love with my auntie, and then was a horse breaker 3 years on their farm. Then he went to Ballarat. He was a steeplechase rider, a parliamentarian, and also a land speculator. But the interesting thing is, in his poem, The Sick Stock Rider, the very first line, this is his most famous poem, if you know anything about poetry. It's the very first line, he knew my grandfather well, Edward, he called him Ned. So he says, "Hold hard, Ned, lift me down once more and lay me in the shade. Old man, you've had your work cut out to guide both horses and hold me in the saddle when I swayed, although the hot, sleepy, silent ride." Now, he goes on to talk about they actually chase these bushrangers, and my grandfather Edward goes off his horse. They had the 6 guns going. They said they all carried guns then because there was a lot of crime with all the gold. He shoots at he's chasing, and Adam Lindsay Gordon, the thing he loved doing was riding horses, and he liked riding fast. He won a lot of steeplechase racing in Melbourne, Adelaide, and Ballarat. Ballarat was the main place. And anyway, in here is a very good story of Edward jumping off his horse and tackling the leader of the bushrangers, and the bushranger turned around and shot at Edward, and it singed his beard, and it talks about that in that poem. So I was really excited to find that and find that. Now, if you've got any questions, I'll give you questions. Whenever I do a lecture or I do a talk, I always give lollies out for anyone that can answer the questions, right? So I've given you some information. You're not just going to sit there idly. You have to answer a question right now. Who knows? You've got to put your hand up to get the lolly. Who knows the name, except for Alan, because you know all the answers. You've heard it 100 times. Sorry. Who knows the name of the farm